Well, we are back with Matt Beal from Lulu. Matt, we had a whole nice conversation with you earlier about where things are with Lulu, where the future of Lulu is headed, that sort of thing. Anyone who wants to tune into that conversation, go find that. You're going to enjoy that. That episode was great. And now I'm joined by my co-host here, Shell Honecker of Indie Author Magazine, also one of the big muckety mucks at Author Nation, to help with planning that conference.
I'm going to put
So
that on my business card.
you could the muckety muck is my official title,
It
but I'll
works.
let you
It
have that.
works.
So Matt, one thing that this is something I know is going to be a hot topic with authors of all stripes, especially indie authors. But what we're going to talk about today is the official title is Navigating the Changing Landscape of Book Marketing. And I think you and Shell both are going to be primed to give us a lot of great advice on this. First of all, when you hear book marketing, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
The first thing that comes to my mind is not going to be the first thing that comes to everybody else's mind, but I think, in my opinion, book marketing, especially right now, given the topic, today's landscape and navigating it, for me, book marketing all boils down to word of mouth. So there's a lot of different ways to achieve that, but in a nutshell, to answer your question, for me, I think of word of mouth.
Word of mouth is still gold standard, but
It
how
is gold standard. Do you mean specifically like with influencers and folks that are recommending, like they become trusted recommendation engines, so to speak?
I'm glad you asked, Shell. So that's certainly one way to achieve word of mouth, right? And that might not always be the most, genuine and sincere way to get word of mouth
Yeah.
using an influencer, especially if they're not somebody who's actually a fan of your work or something like that. We all know you can go pay an influencer to talk about your book or whatever that might be. And, as soon as they're done doing that, that book goes in the garbage and they walk on to their next deal. But when I say word of mouth, I'm really talking about the tried and true concept of word of mouth, how you might tell a friend, Kevin, that you get your haircut at this particular place, and they do the best job that your friend should go get their haircut there. Now, turning that into a digital format, the equivalent of that to me is when we combine book marketing with the trend of direct sales. And so when you have something like, a direct sales setup, and you're now capturing all that customer data from everybody that buys a book from you, you have the ability to encourage word of mouth amongst your existing users. And you start to work on sort of a retention plan. When you have existing users in your customer database, you can talk to them about things like, hey, if you love my latest book, please tell a friend. Or you can give them referral codes that will give their friend, a dollar or two off the book. Or there's all these different ways that you can start to encourage word of mouth um, through digital means. But at the end of the day, there's no more trusted form of marketing than word of mouth. We all buy things based on the word of mouth from friends, coworkers, family members. Um, I don't even trust reviews these days, to be honest with you. Most of them are bots, or they were purchased, or they're just flat out wrong. So word of mouth is the most valuable tool I think you could try to utilize. And as a consumer, or as a purchaser, as a reader or a fan, word of mouth is absolutely one of the most utilized ways that I purchase things.
There's tons of ways to automate that too, right? There's systems like King Sumo where you can create referral codes and you can give people prizes if they refer it on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and all the different socials. And it takes care of the heavy lifting of tracking that for you too, which is kind of cool. What about like user generated content on social media platforms? Are you seeing any upticks in that with people? Because I know that there are TikTok influencers, not to keep coming back to influencers, but that I see that as a big trend, right? So I'm interested in your take on it because I see a lot of, uh, I call them influencers, but they're really people that sort of aggregate and do multiple interviews, and they do have a rabid fan base, and they talk a lot about the books, and they've now become friends with a lot of the authors, and it is a little bit different than like the affiliate FTC disclosure sort of influencer. Those folks, I totally agree with you, but I am seeing that there's a lot more people that are specializing in one particular genre, one particular fandom, right? Like Rebecca Yarros has her huge Fourth Wing group, and they talk about it. And then now they also have rabid fandoms like for Sarah J. Maas, where they have actual fantasy balls around them and just, huge events. That I think is kind of goals, right? What's your take on that?
Yeah, you're 100% right. I make a huge distinction between UGC and influencers for the most part. So for us and my marketing team, when we look at the difference, or we try to delineate between an influencer and, again, like a true fan who's creating some UGC, right? Whether at the behest of the creator, the author, or not. That stuff is way more coveted. And again, that falls directly in line with what I would consider tried and true word of mouth. That is, you can't get any better than that. The more that you could get a fan, a reader, a follower to post something online about your content and how much they love it. I mean, come on, that's as good as winning a lottery. And the more of those you can get, the better. And that essentially is how Book Talk came about, right? I mean, that's UGC to its core. That's people talking about the things that they loved. Now, yes, that spun off into, obviously paid deals for people and things like that. But at its core, it started because fans were ranting and raving about books they either loved or hated. And I think, again, there is no better word of mouth. I literally just glanced over an article before this call that talks about how TikTok is quickly becoming, a very powerful search engine. And there were some statistics in there that right now, nearly 2 in 5 Americans use TikTok as a search engine. And the reason they're doing that is because they feel like they can trust the people that they're finding on TikTok talking about these products or services.
Right.
And so when you see that happening, and you're talking about social media and user generated content, and you look at these articles that are just coming out talking about 2 in 5 people are using TikTok as a search engine, like, holy cow, I'm old school Google days. Like, I would have never thought to go to TikTok and use it as a search engine, but 2 in 5 people are. And it's because of that. There's a level of trust. Somebody on TikTok posted a 60-second clip about their favorite book, and there's something about that you trust, and you'll go and buy that book, or you'll feel good about watching for those user generated pieces of content. So yeah, you're 100% right. I agree with you.
I think coming back to, reviews, right? Because they can be gamed and they can be
Right.
very you can usually spot a bot. Like I play the game Spot a Bot, right? You can see which ones have the same or very, they've been spun and have different phrasing or different verbiage or different things. And the ultimate goal of marketing is to have somebody know, like, and trust you enough to buy something from you. And I think video lends itself immediately to that platform. You immediately know that person. You can either like or not like them, right? That's sort of binary right away. And then, but if you do, then you can trust them and you can also, I think, with video, sort of pick up very quickly whether it's genuine, right? Their enthusiasm shines through, whether or not they're reading a script or whether or not they're genuinely enthusiastic about what they're talking about. So I think you're absolutely right. Word of mouth is amazing. And I think video is going to become more and more important as things go forward, especially because we're trying to capture humanity in general for things.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that same article I was quoting from recently from Adobe, by the way, that's exactly what it says. And again, we talk about the fact that there's a level of trust that needs to be had there in order for somebody to purchase something from you, and video being the medium, the best medium for that. Because like you said, I can literally see the two of you, and if I'd never met you before and you're talking to me about a particular topic like marketing or a product like a book, I can see that reflected in your mannerisms, in your face. And as human beings, we've just kind of learned, for the most part, how to trust people based on a physical proximity or the way that we look and see. Via text, via phone call, it's a lot harder to make those judgments that you were talking about, whether or not you trust this person. Context gets lost, and again, it's a lot harder to establish trust. And so the same is said for digital ads and things like that.
So even with the advent of like AI generated video,
Mm-hmm.
there's social cues, there's body language, there's all kinds of things that we as humans sort of pick up and interpret that can't be replicated. Even if you can change the tone or tenor or lilt of someone's voice using AI and you can edit it to a certain standard, you can't replicate. Like if I reach out and pat Kevin on the shoulder, for example.
Right.
So I was just proving you were actually here.
Bad
Kevin.
touch.
I was just
Bad touch.
Sorry, I was just
No.
proving to everybody you were actually here and you weren't a bot.
I am real. But that brings up an interesting point because we've talked about this before, and this is something that's been on my mind quite a bit, actually, is this shift that I see happening with sort of everyone's moving towards a more analog experience. We brought this up in another episode, but with AI kind of taking the reins in a lot of things, people trying to generate as much AI content as they can and leverage that and use it for marketing, but sometimes use it as the product. I think what people are starting to look for is that sort of authentic relationship with an actual, three-dimensional human being. What do you think is? As we see AI kind of take everything by storm, like how do we achieve that sort of authenticity?
You're absolutely right. In my opinion, there's no data to support this yet, but I suspect it'll start coming out here in the near future. But in my opinion, AI is going to do a lot of that for us. It's naturally going to drive people to want to be around more people. Like you just said, as we get more and more inundated with AI-driven types of technology, we're going to crave human interaction even more. And like I said earlier, human impressions over digital impressions all day long is our marketing strategy here at Lulu. And it's the same thing as what we're discussing right now. When you talk about things like word of mouth marketing or, in-person events is an ever big thing, right? So, Author Nation, one of the biggest reasons why it's such a success, people flock to this thing from everywhere because they want that human interaction. They can sit in front of their computer screen anytime. They can talk to somebody over the internet anytime. But the ability to get around like-minded individuals, people that they trust, people that they know are going through some of the same trials and tribulations as they are, to feel connected to another three-dimensional, like you said, human being, that is more and more valuable to people as time goes on. And AI is only, sort of increasing the rate that people really crave those human interactions. So I say bring on more AI because that's going to just further sort of fuel a lot of the efforts that a lot of us put into marketing things like our books or our products or our services or our events or quite frankly, just the ability to get out and again, meet other like-minded people who are working towards the same goals we are.
Well, that is where I think, in terms of AI at least, that does seem to me like that's where things will shift and AI goes from being the big scary to being a tool that we all use. Instead of worrying that AI is going to take my job as a writer or a video content producer or whatever, rather than being worried about that, we are actually seeing the opportunity for AI to become just a tool we use to enhance our own three-dimensional image. I mean, our own authentic, relatable human.
Well, AI can
brand.
pick up and do some of the jobs that free us to be able to have those human interactions, right? That's for me, that seems to be goals. That seems to be where we need to get to, is so that we can come back and do the thing only we can do. Only we have the imagination to tell those stories. And so if we let AI do the heavy lifting of, creating social posts or creating marketing content or whatever it is, there's lots and lots of tools to do that. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be something that you have supplement to so that you can free yourself from that rote, busy work, and you don't have to do that. And what's interesting to me too is that all of this conversation leads back to one of the main things that I see, which is selling direct. It's going to be absolutely huge. And I think it's going to be critical for authors to incorporate it in some form or fashion for their success, because that gives them that immediacy and that connection with their customer first and foremost, but it also gives them data. And I think controlling your data and not building your house on rented land is going to become more and more important in the future because there's so many pivots and shifts that are happening. I know authors now in the EU that have gotten completely off of Facebook because Facebook is charging for them to keep their data private. And there's lots of folks that are not willing to pay the $10 per month to not have their data shared with advertisers. And so, all of us that are building, we still have the opportunity to use them as advertising platforms and marketing solutions. But if we're building our fandom on a social network, or if we're building our structure on a service, it's you're less able to control your interaction with your customer. You're always at the whim of an algorithm, or you're always at the whim of somebody else's, showing your stuff to somebody. So that's my futuristic take on marketing. But it's also why I think Lulu is completely well positioned to help indie authors in this space, right? Because you can help them deliver that product to them without having to be beholden to a retailer. It's just going to be more and more important.
Yeah, I agree with both of you, in what you've said around AI and just, especially Kevin, since the onset of it becoming like the topic, like over the
Yeah.
last year, like, we've continually told people that come up to us at shows or ask us about it or whatever that might be, like, don't be afraid of it. It is a tool and that's it. And yes, it will do some really cool stuff for sure. And it'll keep doing even cooler stuff, you know, but at the end of the day, it's a tool. It's not going to replace you as a writer. It's not going to replace you as a creative. AI will just never do that. And when we talk about what we were talking about earlier, this idea that humans crave interaction from other humans and things like that, AI can't reproduce that stuff. So the more comfortable you get with it now and understand how AI can help you as a creative, as a writer, whatever your medium is, the better off you're going to be. Every day it gets better and better. And so, Shel, when you talk about things like direct sales and how important that is to authors, and yes, we talked about this on a previous podcast, that is the future of publishing, selling direct, creators owning those databases of customers and fans and not giving those to third-party retailers to do whatever they want with them. When you talk about those things, right now, some of the biggest, scariest components of selling direct are things like taxes, configuring shipping. Imagine, it's only a few more months before there's some AI that can do that for you. Use AI to do the things that you don't want to do so that you can have more time to do the creative things, that you can have more time to be at events, meeting with your fans and meeting fellow authors and fellow creators and publishers and things like that. Let AI do all that crap you don't want to do. Let AI figure out your taxes. That's what it'll be good for. It'll be great for that stuff. And so
Yeah.
we're not far off from that. So embrace that technology. Start playing with it right now if you haven't. That's what we tell people. Find the smallest, most least intimidating piece of AI tool that you can find and just start playing with it. And by the way, spoiler alert, most of us have been using it and just didn't even know it through things like
Exactly.
Grammarly,
Yeah.
a bunch of these other tools, just
Yeah.
in different forms. It's
Yeah.
not scary. Take control of it. It's like anything else that you're scared of.
I also think that there's a misnomer, right? We say AI, and that seems to lump everything in with AI. But
Right.
there's also like there's AI that we've been using all along for like predictive text,
Right.
and things like in ProWritingAid and in Grammarly. Those things have always existed, right? You're just calling on a database, and the database is recalling it back and making suggestions. And then you've got generative AI, which I think is probably the scary part for folks because they have a misunderstanding of how those large language models were trained, and they have a misunderstanding of where that data comes from. And I mean, we've got a PR problem in general for the generative model companies, but
Yeah.
there's all kinds of things around that. But I agree with you, Matt. It is a tool that we can utilize.
Yes. And speaking of tools, I mean, everyone loves going on and on about AI, but we want to loop back to what the actual topic of this conversation is, because AI is a tool that you could use, and you could use it in for marketing. I think there's probably going to be not just in generating content or generating materials, but I think it's probably positioned to help with the actual marketing at some point.
Yeah.
But let's talk then about what tools we currently have and where we think things are going. Like, you brought up a scary word, Shel, which was data. For some reason, data scares the crap out of authors. But how can we kind of nudge everybody back to having a comfort level with data and train them in the best ways to use that?
Data doesn't have to be scary, Kevin.
I'm speaking as the everyman. I'm not
got
talking
it.
from personal experience, but Matt,
I think I probably somewhere in between Kevin and Shel on this. I know Shel is a big tech and data nerd, and Kevin, it sounds like maybe you're not quite so much, and I'm probably somewhere in between. I do love data, and I have a love-hate relationship with it as well. And thankfully, I have a great team here at Lulu that takes care of a lot of that for me. But I will tell you this. The one thing we know, and the one reason that we've been successful in pushing, our direct sales apps and things, is because you can't grow without data. There's just no way. It's impossible. So if you're serious about being an author who wants to have a sustainable author business, And when I say that, I mean, you'd love for that to be your career, or what pays the bills, or most of them. You're going to have to get comfortable with data. So I tend I tend to take that sort of like, the same way I talk to my kids about something. You're just gonna have to do it. Like you're gonna have to figure out a way to get comfortable with it and do it. But it's not a bad thing, and it's not scary. And you can start small, and there are easy ways to start small. And when you talk about tools that we're using, Kevin, one of the most important tools in your arsenal, outside of whatever e-commerce platform you're using or you start to use, one of the most important tools will be your ESP, or your email service provider, and choosing a good email service provider where you can start building a database of contacts, or customers and fans that you can then segment out and use for marketing purposes. That tool and the data that you would get from that tool, that's how you're going to start to grow your empire in a much faster and more compound sort of way. So I don't think data is a scary thing at all. I think if somebody points you in the right direction and shows you how to start small with it, and really how to get a couple wins under your belt with data, like understanding, oh, the last book I just released, I sold 1,200 copies. And of those 1,200 copies, oh, it looks like 600 of the people that bought it are in, this particular region, or whatever that might be. And then you take that data and you do something cool with it. You send them all something in the mail that's specific to their region, thanks them for buying your book, but also highlights, hey, I'm going to be where you live in 2 months, and I'd love to sit down and do this with you. Or there's a lot of authors that try to utilize things like sending out, Valentine's Day cards. But because they don't own their customer data, they have to do really janky things like say, hey, come fill out this Google form if you want a Valentine's
Right.
Day card for me. Well, that absolutely kills all the spontaneity of what you're
Yeah.
trying to do. It
My
kills
wife
the
hates
wow
when I do
factor.
that to her.
Yeah, I mean, same, Kevin, same. So, having that data, it allows you to do so many cool things. And so once you embrace the idea that it's not scary, and in fact, it makes marketing and customer retention so much easier, and it allows you to do really cool things like surprise your customers with a Valentine's Day card that talks about your next smutty romance novel that's coming out, or whatever that might be. Like, that's my take on it.
So we've got sessions at Author Nation that are going to actually talk to people about specific ways that they can do that. Because like you said, with the ESPs, you get all of that data, but there's so many things that are built in now to modern ESPs. The email service providers also have push chats. So when someone comes to your website, you can say, yes, please send me information. We do that with the magazine every month. When we do a release, we send it out and push it to people's desktop computers. You can push things to apps now. You can send people text messages now. There's so many ways, and they're built into those email service providers. So it's not just the newsletter that you're getting with some of those companies. You're also getting a full marketing suite of things. Now there's cost associated with some of those things, but honestly, some people have sort of an email blindness now. They get so many emails that they may not pay attention to it the way they once did. So having new avenues, using the same tech tool that you have already, like MailChimp, MailerLite, and Brevo, and Sendinblue, all of those, they're already there. So you can start utilizing them. We're going to have some of those sessions at Author Nation to talk about how to do that.
Sheer coincidence.
Sheer coincidence.
All
My
right.
gosh. How did that come about?
So marketing is one of those, it's another scary word actually for a lot of authors. It shouldn't be, but it is. And I've talked to hundreds of thousands of authors, and many of them are kind of afraid of that idea of marketing. Usually the thing they say is like, well, I don't like to sell. So there's a kind of misinterpretation there. What do we say to authors like that? How do we convince them that, from my perspective, I have a definition of marketing in my head that's, I'm making sure that my book is in front of the right person at the time they're most ready to buy. That's the approach I've always taken. And that means anything I do can be marketing. If I'm doing a podcast, if I've sent out an email, if I'm post on social media, any of that can be marketing. But is there like a preferred marketing tactic people should be focused on?
So I approach it, for me, marketing is very simple, and I've said this on other podcasts. So, but for me, the definition of marketing is just making friends. You make friends in all different ways. You can do it digitally, you can do it, face to face. But for me, if you approach marketing as making friends, it's not so scary and daunting, and it's not a sales activity. You know what I mean? At its core, marketing is there to help sell things, right? Or to gain some sort of market share and something or another. Your definition was great, Kevin. That's, That's the definition you would learn if you took a course on marketing or watched any, online course about marketing, and that's correct. But if you're talking about how to get an author to embrace the concept of marketing without being too fearful of coming off like a salesperson or something like that, I simply tell them all the time, it's just making friends. How do you prefer to make friends? And if your preferred way to make friends is to go to an event and talk to people face to face and maybe put on a fun costume that pertains to your latest trilogy that you wrote or whatever that might be, then do it that way. And if your preferred way of making friends is online, then you're probably pretty good at it. Do it that way, or at least start with that way. So marketing is nothing more than making friends if you're doing it the right way, and just start with whatever way you're most comfortable making friends.
I have to say, when I hear the phrase "marketing is making friends," my response is, "Oh." So Shell,
My friends.
it's like I'm kind of thinking, like, do I want any of my friends to buy my books at this point? Shell, what do you think is where are we going with marketing for authors at this point? Things have changed so much in the industry.
I mean, it's changed, but the more things change, the more they stay the same. I think it comes back to Matt's point, which is just relationships, right? It's just having that connected relationship with people. And I think the only thing that I've seen that has changed in marketing is we're sort of edging away from the concept of the sales funnel. We talked about this in previous episodes, right? Where we're not really doing a funnel where we have to fill the top with these people and we give them things for free and then we take them deeper and take them deeper. It's a flywheel. So you make a relationship with somebody and then you keep talking to them over and over and over again. And at certain points around that flywheel, you have points where you hope that they buy things and you make things available to them. But in that way, it's just a relationship and a continuous conversation as opposed to a rote set of activities that get them to the sale. And then what? Right. So, but coming back to it, I think it's conversation. And I also think it's, again, you understanding your own business and your own customer and your own data. Again, that data word, that's so scary, but it is important. And it is just like what Matt said, it's something that you can do with that data once you know that data. There's great tools like ScribeCount, right? That has, and what I love about ScribeCount, we use ScribeCount specifically because it integrates with WooCommerce and we do fulfillment through Lulu. So we have all of our numbers in one spot. We can see our direct sales versus our Amazon sales versus our wide sales in one spot in a way that's pretty colors. It's not intimidating. That's the biggest thing is how do you make the data less intimidating? And there's tools out there that can help you do that.
Yeah. So we're getting close to having to wrap up, but I want to offer everyone listening and watching our best tips. Like what are some tactics or tricks or what are some things that we would recommend you do in terms of your book marketing, especially if you are kind of afraid of it? Matt, let's start with you. What would you recommend people focus on first?
Yeah, so in line with the question, I think that my tip would be, again, I would approach it the same way you would approach trying to make a new friend. I think that marketing can be so daunting. There's so many different things you could do. Everybody does it wrong in the beginning. They try to be everything everywhere and on every channel, and that's just the wrong way to do it. You burn yourself out and you end up hating marketing because of that. So start small, start comfortable, start with the concept of making friends. And again, if your comfort zone is that you're that person that thrives in real life situations in front of people at events, at your local bookstore, whatever that might be, wherever your space is that you feel comfortable and safe and you like, then start there. And again, if it's social media, if it's on the internet, because you're one of those people that doesn't necessarily like people, but you do like to meet people online, then start there. Wherever you're good and comfortable. Yep, I see you raising your hand, Shell.
Yeah. I was going to do a Taylor Swift. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Yeah.
Yeah. You just, your comfort level is what's going to dictate that. And again, I think if you just think about it as you're making friends, good marketing these days is all about human impressions and relationships, period. I just don't think there's any way to argue that. You can apply that to any concept we've talked about on this podcast or any others as it relates to direct sales or anything else. It's all about relationships, word of mouth. That all starts with trying to make a friend. I don't mean the type of friend that, you're going to hang out with for the rest of your life, but a friend that's going to love your work Every time you put out a new book, they're going to buy it. And more importantly, they're going to go tell their friends. And then those friends are going to tell other friends. And before you know it, you're spending very little money on marketing because you've built this network of quote unquote friends.
Shell, what's your best advice?
My best advice is to think about who your ideal customer is, who your ideal reader is, so that you can figure out where they're actually hanging out to go make friends, right? So if you are a romance author and you write sweet romance, don't hang out in the smutty forums. They're not there. You're fishing in the wrong pond. So think about who your ideal reader is and who your comp authors are, who is like you, and then think about where they actually are, and then go join those rooms and start small and give before you take, and just get started making friends, like Matt said.
And I think
I'll throw one more thing in there. I'm sorry, Kevin. This came up the other day, and I think this goes along with what Shell said, what I've said, what you've said so far. But I think the most important thing to remember, though, is that you have to do it all the time. It's not something you can do once a month, once a week. Like, you have to do it all the time, and that's why I say get comfortable with it. And yeah, like Shell said, finding a place where your readers are going to be, you're going to be more comfortable there. But it has to be done all the time. There has to be consistency. That's the biggest thing. And when you look at UGC that's created on TikTok and all these other channels that are really hot right now, those people are hot because they're consistent. They show up every day for their followers and fans. And so you've got to be consistent. It doesn't have to be 5 times a day, but you got to keep doing it. It's not a once a month thing.
Well, the thing, I think, coming back to newsletters really quickly, it's the difference between talking at people and talking with people.
Right.
So if you send a newsletter 6 months from now, you're training them to expect that, right? So they're not going to pay attention to you if you are inconsistent about it. Or then if you only send things when you have something for sale, you're training them to not pay attention to it because then they feel sold to, versus starting and being consistent with the conversation, asking questions, expecting that they can hit reply and answer those questions. That's a conversation.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to have to wrap up. My 2 cents here at the end, by the way, is you're always better off being as genuine and authentic and honest as you can. Don't pretend just because it's trendy to do X, Y, or Z on TikTok or elsewhere. If that's not you, don't pretend, because your readers in particular are going to see right through that and they won't like it. And you won't want to have to cultivate an audience of people where you have to be someone other than who you are. The best marketing is always going to be yourself and be authentic. I'm glad we're saying it at the end because no one can disagree with me. Because we're going to cut everything off.
I would never dare.
So thank you again, Matt, for joining us, and Shell, of course. I love being surrounded by people who are much smarter than I am and much kinder, to be honest. You guys both said such nice, wonderful things. And I'm sitting here like, man, I really need to get on board with the program. But for everyone watching, listening, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you go to authornation.live, which is where you're going to find everything about Author Nation, the conference as well. So go check that out. We want to see you there in November in Las Vegas. So go get your tickets, get everything set up now. So thank you, and tune in to the next Author Nation podcast. We'll see you next time.